I'm going to give an abridged TCC update, but for those of you that are new here, we have an existing urban greening award from the state where we're planting 650 trees on the community side and over 1,200 on the city side. Is that right, Sue? 1,250-ish? Can't remember your total. Plenty of trees. And we want to make sure that these two projects are working well together. And so we had our kickoff tree planting yesterday at Mattie Harrell Park, where we planted 26 new trees, certainly in one of the most air pollution burdened census tracts in Stockton. So it was nice getting something together in the outdoors, and the city was very helpful in making a cool event happen. I'm going to ask that we just move on to review where we left off with the vegetative barriers. We talked about the importance of this strategy and this request for proposals that we're going to have to work through into, the request for proposals, Aaron, is just a component of the work plan that CARB will have to approve, right? So
well, the RFP is something that we will do. Like the work plan just gives us authority to spend the money. Here's a general plan I'm going to do it. The RFP is something we do. ARB doesn't see it. We do it with the community here, and we run it ourselves.
Right, absolutely right. So thanks for clarifying on that. And so within the work plan, we'll have the two measures, vegetative barriers and urban greening. And everybody, you have a link to the SERP in the agenda. And we've discussed the vegetative barriers measure, which is about planting trees as close as possible to sources of concern. And we discussed at the last meeting how much the payoff for that falls off the further away you get from the emission source. So if you plant really close to a freeway, your chances of knocking down a lot of that exhaust and particulate matter is much higher than if you were to plant, say, several blocks away at a school site. All trees are good, but some trees are better than others. And so we were talking, and we had a representative from Caltrans on the last meetings. We were talking about the possibility of planting in the Caltrans setbacks and weaving this program in with their right of access and even some of their existing funding for things like graffiti abatement and maintenance. I've had one meeting about that out of cycle, and I'll just update that it will require someone to pull an encroachment permit in Caltrans right away. And so figuring out who the appropriate applicant is for that. Whether or not that's the air district as an applicant or the city as an applicant, bringing this project in under its various roles, especially around TCC, or if possibly a community-based organization could be that encroachment permit applicant. But for vegetative barrier strategies to work in that proximal zone near a freeway, we're going to have to identify a lead agency. And I think that, Aaron, that'll be a key criteria for the eventual request for proposals, is whether or not they're an eligible entity for that type of an application.
Well, I think, yeah, you're right. That's a big one, but also, I think we talked about last time too, the contractor selected. Do you want them, all B everything, or you want to separate a couple different ones? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think, just from rumors, it sounds like, there's a really well-respected air quality monitoring and data organization called Sonoma Tech that does really first-rate work, and I think is poised to be one of your applicants in the Fresno process, right?
Well, I think they would almost be a sub of somebody else. Like they would do like the research on the barrier itself.
Right.
Like I think they would be subbed out with the contractor we have. They'd sub some work to them. Is how we're going to probably look at it.
Gotcha. So that's what I tried to break out here in the meeting objectives, is that even though we all know where the freeways are, we really need to study the freeways as emission sources with respect to wind direction. So that'll help us prioritize, which stretches of the road that we want to focus on. And that's going to require some objective research. I mean, I think we could all pick our favorite neighborhood, but it would be nice to study the roadways in the AB 617 study area to pick which ones we want to prioritize. And so I feel like in some of the other communities, and I want to bring that up with this group, is that studying our emission sources for vegetative barriers might be a separate scope of work, versus just finding a tree planting org and plugging in trees where it's easiest. So I don't know if anybody wants to discuss that briefly. Anybody have any concerns about studying the project area before we get to work in it? You know, I don't know what those sorts of things cost, but, oh, I see a hand. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a question I would like to ask. Who made the decision? What area that was supposed to be in that you're mentioning it? And two, I know that putting plant in right by the freeway. I mean, tree by the freeway. To me, it's unsafe because anybody could easily get into a car accident into a tree. And I know the last time somebody told me that an ice plant would be better to slow a car down from if it's out of brake or they lost control of the car, it doesn't hit the, but also go slow it down.
So I'm just going to stop you that nobody's picked any place yet. And so that's what I'm thinking is why we need someone to study the roadways. And as for traffic controls, I don't think that's a problem that we can address with a vegetative barrier strategy. I do understand that planting trees near fast-going cars is a bad idea, and I think obviously no unsafe plantings should be funded by this. But also, ice plant won't knock down air pollution. So,
right. Yeah, but my point is that when you say vegetative plant, are you referring different kind of plant that's going to be able to like, what is it? It's going to be like fruit? It's going to be a marketing stand? What are you putting? I plant.
Yeah, Doug. So I think just as a quick primer, a vegetative barrier is a vertical vegetation structure like a tree or even a sound wall with vines on it, or ideally a combination of both, and possibly even additional hedgerows, all of which create a living buffer that from cars. So fruiting and traffic safety would be outside of this scope. Yeah. So Mary Elizabeth, I see your hand.
Thanks. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. So I think it's a good idea to look at, some of our maybe quadrants, even, like split it into, manageable areas that could be considered, and, take a look at where the polluters are located, where the sources of pollution, and try to, formulate some kind of interception. So I think some strategic thinking is a good idea.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think, I'm kind of a one-trick pony when I think of a vegetative barrier, and that's about blocking traffic-related pollution. But we have a whole host of stationary emission sources that are always running and always issuing pollutants. And so a lot of those being at the Port of Stockton, and I know the port has been really proactive about changing the way it relates to its tenants and helping their tenants control for emissions. So they're even looking at funding their own vegetative barriers around specific sites. But I know obviously the port strategies matter a lot to Stockton. All of our top emission sources are located within the port, and they're all upwind of our most impacted census tracts with regards to public health indicators. So making sure that the port is its own quadrant makes a lot of sense. We also have the ocean going vessels there as well, all of which are upwind from the intersection of Highway 4 and I-5. So yeah, so some sort of subdivision of the AB 617 study area makes a lot of sense. So I'll put that in the notes, and that can be part of what we talk about when we get down to what's ultimately going to need to be in the work plan with regards to vegetative barriers. I already covered the next item, which is planting. Who can plant in these places? We're going to have to find out who can apply for an encroachment permit from Caltrans or from the port. It may be that the port, as property owner, can green light a vegetative barrier strategy on their property. we might find out that the port is the easiest place to work in a lot of these scenarios. And it would certainly be time well spent. This third bullet I have in here is the toughest nut to crunch. None of us wants to plant trees, vines, or forbs or shrubs that are going to be dead in a couple of years. So there really is a stewardship and maintenance strategy. And I listen in on the West Oakland CERP process, and they're about a year ahead of us in some of this. And so they've talked about using some of their AB 617 funds to set up a maintenance fund that a maintenance subcommittee oversees. And so they're working with their version of Great Valley Conservation Corps. It's their Civic Corps. And with that funding in place, they're planning to create a scenario where Civic Corps is visiting and maintaining their vegetated barriers and urban greening strategies. So the long-term stewardship challenge, there is a solution, and members from that subcommittee have offered to come and talk to us about stewardship and maintenance. So I would like to recommend that at either the February or March meeting, we hear from them how they've been dealing with it and see if any of that translates to here. I don't know that we need a vote on that, but does anybody else think that's a good idea, or is that just, I saw some nodding. Cool, yeah, I see some thumbs up. So when we get to the end of the agenda, which I'm gonna push us through to real fast, we can decide if that's in the February agenda or the March agenda for the next tree subcommittee meeting. So we've covered the vegetative barriers scope. Why don't we take a minute and everybody can open up the AB 617 CERP link in there and scroll down to page 66 through 69. And I'll share it on my screen and we can review the urban greening and forestry measure UG.1. Does that sound good to everybody else? That way we can know what we have authorization to do in AB 617. So let me wait for my computer to show up and let me share the CERP. And I think we said it's all the way down here on page 63-ish. UG1, did I skip it? Vegetative barriers. There he is. Urban greening sources in Stockton. Yeah, and urban greening, I think, was designed to be sort of a broader forestry application to help address urban heat island effect, which exacerbates a whole host of public health outcomes. It also can potentially be a meaningful investment in a commercial corridor and part of an economic revitalization strategy. So let's take a second and read page 66 and 67. And you guys can all open this up. So I'm going to scroll through down to see what we talked about here. The CERP actually outlines partners and collaborative programs that we could use. All right, and here's the actual measure, UG1.
Well, Matt, I just noticed in there that the district is offering to continue to seek out additional grant funds for further greening and vegetative barriers outside of what is already allocated. So I would ask that the district, like, keep your eyes open, and everybody keep your eyes open.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And I think, the district's partnership and this sort of seed funding would actually make us a very eligible community for a lot of these grant programs. For starters, the Air District already has their mobile monitoring lab in South Stockton. So we're getting really high quality data about the need to reduce pollution, and that'll come with some additional weather and heat measurements. And our transformative climate community's partnership with the city is really, you know, an applied research opportunity to prove that we can work together and plant a lot of trees. That data and our partnership history will make us wildly competitive for California Relief grants, California Natural Resource Agency urban greening grants, and then the CAL FIRE grant program that really should hit Stockton every other year with an additional $500,000. And so one way to be strategic about other people's money, which is always the best money to spend, is to talk about our urban greening measure meeting some of the things that go unfunded in these grant programs. So like CAL FIRE's grant program is highly competitive, and it gets awarded based on where you're at and how many greenhouse gases, how many tons you reduce. So wealthy communities that have full city staff can propose to this grant program, and all of their money just goes into trees, right? Whereas in Stockton, we're gonna have to use our grants to fund people, concrete removal, and maintenance because we have old infrastructure and really challenged human resources. So one strategy is for a good chunk of our AB 617 dollars to go into an urban greening fund that can be used as, you know, match dollars. Like one idea would be $100,000 a year for maintenance of urban forestry projects. And those match dollars would make a Stockton application to the CAL FIRE program much, much more competitive. And in that scenario, you're using $100,000 a year or $200,000 per 2-year cycle to get an additional $500,000 in CAL FIRE urban forestry money. So that, I think, plays in nicely to the idea of creating a stewardship and maintenance strategy out of both of the vegetative barrier and urban greening measures. And I think that's what's captured in sort of this get creative about other funding narrative here in the urban greening section.
66.
Aaron, yeah. What's that?
Page 66 is where it talks. Yeah.
Aaron, I would ask, I mean, usually public agencies are wary of putting their dollars in a holding pattern as a potential match funding for as yet uncertain dollars. Has anybody talked about in Fresno this idea of using their AB 617 dollars as capacity building dollars?
That's one of it, is a little bit where, you know, the contractor we're looking to do the project, you know, part of the proposal would be to expand upon projects that are already happening. You know, say, for example, the TCC that's actually happening in Fresno.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that and you make it bigger,
Yeah.
right? You could propose it that way, or you can do your separate thing. And how would you like to do this and like build on the infrastructure that's kind of going, the momentum that's going, and just make it bigger? I mean, so we'd like to see the proposal, how they would do that. It's kind of the thought behind that a little bit.
Gotcha. So, you know, in TCC, for those of you that don't know, is generally awarded to a city, and then through a city, community partners are brought into a major project. In Fresno, they got the full 28 million, if I recall correctly. But in that scenario, the dollars would be going to the city.
Can you zoom the screen up? Can you do, a lot of people asking to put zoom the screen a little bit?
Yeah, can you zoom in on your thing there?
Sure can. My apologies.
There you go. There you go.
So, so Aaron, in that scenario, then the Air District is identifying the city of Fresno as the only qualified sole source applicant.
No, not at all. No, that'd be incorrect. The city of Fresno will not be an applicant. It'd be a nonprofit. It'd be something that, you know, organization that does trees. But it was just asking them to look, you know, it would ask an organization to look at the bigger picture. How can you expand upon something that's already happening, make it bigger, better, basically, like take this money and just kind of keep going type of thing.
Gotcha. So we have folks on here from the city with the TCC project, like Grant out of the manager's office and Sue out of Public Works, who Puentes, Clifton, Little Manila, and myself work with on our TCC project. So, you know, and obviously there's a lot of needs that go unmet in that project.
Yeah, so the idea is yeah, like I said, the TCC will kind of already start the foundation for stuff, right? So there's no reason for this $1 million to build that foundation when it's already there,
Right.
because that would be kind of a waste of money if you're already doing that, essentially. It's
Right.
kind of my thought. I could be wrong here, but that's kind of the thought here, is that let's do it to actually do the projects, not build the foundation that's already been built.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, proud to say we do have that being built, and you guys can see the type of action here is for partnership and incentives. So this feels like a pretty flexible measure, depending on how we draft that.
It's designed to flow in a way where the community gets, obviously the input, how it needs to flow. Obviously our input is, well, we have certain things to meet to report back to the state, what we did and what we got out of it, right? How much of my trees or what you do with it. But it's literally for the community to decide how they want to do this and what contractors will be chosen to do the work, and then report back what was accomplished and where to go and what happened.
Gotcha. Well, and I think this also begs the question that we make sure that we review really closely our partners in our outreach database that we have linked in the spreadsheet, to make sure that, I'm just trying to be sensitive. My organization is a community-based organization that's in contract with the city to build that type of a program. And we are already doing that. So I'm a little wary to talk about this project funding me. So in my project. So I want to make sure that we're exhausting potential partners. Oh yeah, Doug, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I don't understand how the partnership have not been part of this subcommittee and the actual amount of budget, $1 million per agent, or that's for the half of the $1 million be going to the tree. How did that work, please? That's all.
Yeah, we have $1 million in total for this strategy. And I think it's up to you and me and members of this subcommittee to make a recommendation that Aaron thinks can live to the broader community steering committee to agree on that strategy. So the $1 million I think can be feathered out in a variety of strategies, so long as they address this urban greening point, this UG.1 measure. Thanks. Sorry, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review this measure, so I can see if there's any other hands up. Oh, Stephanie, I see your hand.
Thanks. I want to acknowledge that I know that there are some people who are kind of new to this AB 617 process and maybe haven't been with us since like CERP development. So I think just to provide some context, what Matt just shared was this part of this CERP, the Community Emission Reduction Program that was developed last March. So I think some folks noticed maybe some of the information with the parts and partners are a little
I
outdated.
can't hear you, Stephanie. I think you need to.
Oh, can you hear me now?
A little slower and a little clearer, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I just want to kind of reiterate, just I know some folks haven't been with us this whole process, so just wanted to share, that document that Matt Holmes just shared is part of our Community Emission Reduction Program, which was developed and finished last March, which kind of outlines the program, just generally what we wanted to spend money on. Kind of this next phase is we're working on a draft, and you'll hear it a couple of different ways, a work plan or project plan or program plan. Basically, all of those do indicate this is basically how we're going to spend the money. It's guidelines for how to spend the money. And that's what Aaron, we're working on a draft right now, and Aaron does have a draft that we can take a look at if folks are interested. And that is the document that needs to be submitted and approved to CARB in order to actually be able to spend the funding. And then kind of the step after that is, again, this RFP that I think we've been talking about a lot, which is the request for proposals. And that will actually, like Aaron has said, there's two separate ones, one for urban greening, one for vegetative barriers. And that is the actual document that will solicit partners to actually implement the program, because we as an air district are not like a tree planting organization. So I just wanted to make sure as we're discussing this that we're, everyone kind of is clear on the steps that we're talking about, just to make sure we're all kind of using the same language and know where we are. Does anyone have any questions about that?
No, thanks for catching that. And then I just want to acknowledge what I'm seeing in the chat from Richard about adding Peace and Justice Network, and then the reference to fathers and families. They're currently going through dissolution in the Attorney General's office, and there's a whole host of things being evaluated there. But insofar as this measure is concerned, the TCC contract for urban forestry that was originally earmarked for fathers and families has been transferred to Little Manila Rising. So I think we could substitute there and certainly add, well, I don't know that the SERP needs to add Peace and Justice Network because our trees subcommittee recommendation will have a list of potential community partners that need to be involved in implementation. Does anybody edit a SERP after CARB approves it?
No, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we'll
so-
just continue to develop as we're working on our project plans and RFPs and such.
Gotcha. Yeah, Richard, just so you know, the SERP that was approved July 29th was a hell of an administrative hurdle. And once it was approved, even CARB, who was approving it, was unable to edit it. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. But I want to go back to the agenda, which I'm having trouble seeing.
Before we go on,
yes.
Matt, this is Margot, I just want to, so yes, I would like to see Aaron's draft. So Stephanie says that Aaron has a draft. And I think perhaps for the next meeting, if we can, or maybe sooner, I can't visualize the pathway forward. And I wonder if there's a way to schematically say, well, this is where we're at, this is what we need to do next. And because I can't quite picture, are you saying that we will be going out and assessing areas for appropriateness for planting trees, or will that be one of our contractors as part of the RFP that does that? I just can't quite picture.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I do think that needs, that when I was talking about potentially having studies as part of the RFP, someone who studies vegetative barrier opportunities, that would be part of the contract that someone enters into with the Air Pollution Control District. But certainly members of this committee and the CSC should be as vocal as they need to be in identifying priorities. But yeah, I think having that be sort of a transparent deliverable from a contract makes the most sense versus me telling everybody to plant trees by my house.
Yeah, and I'd also like to emphasize that again, it seems like we're focusing on the Port of Stockton, the area, because that's such a polluted area. But we can't forget about the eastern part of our boundary area either, which sometimes has a dearth of trees. So I'd like to, make sure that that's in the assessment as well.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, we have been working in the TCC world about identifying priority areas as well. And there's a lot of overlap here. So we definitely want to plant these vegetative barriers. But we've also looked at the East Main Street neighborhood all the way out there where Main Street hits 99. And it really is the largest gap in the urban canopy in the city. It's the most underplanted neighborhood that we have. And then also focusing on some of these corridors that have, lots of economic activity like MLK and El Dorado, some of which also have peculiar truck activity that can be addressed through other parts of our SERP. But those are vital corridors that have no trees, they're super hot, and they're full of pollution. And so maybe we should, in our next meeting, present on what TCC, the work team there, has identified as its priorities. I kind of just told you what they are, but there's I-5 vegetative barriers, there's Highway 4 vegetative barriers, there's East Main Street and El Dorado Street have been places that we think we can handle with the size of that contract. Now, this committee could say, that's great, it needs to go further. So our RFP for urban greening needs to grow the El Dorado corridor or also add the Lafayette corridor or whatever it is you guys all think seems to be underserved. So looking at the clock, it's 4:42. I'm wondering if maybe now that we're through the holidays and we're going to have a monthly meeting, we might get more traction if we bite off less with an agenda and we tackle sort of one issue as completely as possible in each of the ensuing agendas. And I'm also open to any other suggestions because I've been talking a lot.
Matt, I would just say this is, I think, me personally, I think it's important to get the plan submitted and approved to ARB, because then that is the next step. After that is, then we start the work of actually, okay, where are we gonna put these things? Start working on the RFP, the languages go in there. I think the next step is for us to, go over the, maybe send the work plan out to the draft to the community members. And then the next meeting, everybody has their comments or might have you, and then we get this thing submitted to ARB and get that process going, I believe.
So we can get the work plan approved without having the RFPs completely ironed
Oh,
out?
yeah, definitely. This is just the basically kind of gives us the framework to do it, and then we do everything else behind that. We just want to get it approved, get it ready to go. ARB says go, and we're going off on our own. All the RFP, that's not approved by CARB. That's all us.
Awesome. I love the sound of that. So can everybody see the draft work plan? It's attached in the agenda. And this is the link that I've dropped in here, Aaron? Is this an example work plan that we can edit and amend?
This is it. I don't know. Was this Stephanie, was this the Word version of it?
Yeah.
No, PDF.
This is an older version, Aaron, from.
This is older. This is an older version, I
Yeah.
think. So I have one that's a little newer.
You've been working on it.
I think I just sent to Stephanie the Word version of it, so she can get that out to the community members.
Great. Yeah, and I'd be happy to convert that to a Google Doc for anybody that wants to co-edit in real time. And
Their monitoring guys are taking calendars.
So Stephanie, can we do that? Can we get the Word version to the group here?
Are taking in staff.
Yes, I'm wondering, I think I could probably just pull it into the chat and just share it with everyone.
Okay,
I think Zoom will let us do that. But after this meeting, I will formally do the posting on our website, emailing to the whole CSC too.
Oh, great. And then we can really, at our February meeting, work through everybody's comments and recommended edits and get that document closer for you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I will say this, keep in mind that this is just a high level document. This is not details. This is not RFP. This is not locations. This is basically just, how to say it? I don't even try and use the car, I guess. This is just the car we're getting approved to go and do what we need to do here.
We're getting Sacramento off our back, everybody.
There you go. So
that
and then basically we do have some checks we have to check off to make sure we do this correctly when we report back. And this is one of those checks.
Awesome. Mary Elizabeth, I see your hand, and then next Doug.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on what Margot was looking at, in terms of like a roadmap. Would it be possible to have some kind of schematic, where we're kind of looking at, just to where our attention is focused, and, look at, maybe a map with some markings on it that we can all take a look at. And then I was wondering also if, if somebody might be interested to, review together, this draft vegetative barrier measure, so that maybe there could be some pre-discussion before the next meeting, otherwise the meeting could just be about that. And then we end up, with not having it completed to go to the next step. So, just like a goal, did we want to have this work plan done by February? Did we want to have it done by March? Aaron, what were you thinking? It seems like it's pretty imperative.
Well, I would like my goal, I'll be honest with you, because we're getting in 2022 now, right? So it's time's going, right? So we have the draft, basically it's already been approved for Chapter and for Fresno, right? It just gives you this framework to do it. And the goal would be to review it and literally take a couple comments next meeting and get it submitted to ARB, because we can always go back and edit it if we have to. If like, oh, you know what, we missed that. But this is just the framework. It doesn't change anything. I'm telling you this, but we already done it with Fresno. We've already did it with Fresno. So this doesn't change anything. This is just the framework to do the project. So don't get hung up on the fact that this is the end all be all. This is just the framework.
Yeah.
This is the framework, and yeah, they're gonna do urban green vegetative barriers in Stockton. This is the framework, and great. So it's not anything, and you can actually look on our website for the approved one for Fresno and for Chapter. If you want any reference, that's there and approved, you can see it. And literally, this is the same thing. If you go to our website, look at the Fresno Urban Green Vegetative Barrier Approved CERP plan, our measure. I get the CERP measures confused here, but it's already approved. You can read it, and it's the same thing as if we just changed the links and the name. Basically, it's because there was no sense in redoing the work that's already done.
Awesome. Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I would get Margo Mary beat me to it about Margo. I think definitely we need something to visualize a map. I think that is wonderful. But did Aaron, did you mention about the 2020? If the budget's going to change again, or let the MAD request $1 million, and all of a sudden the budget has increased the budget for what the air quality values have, can we go and ask for more if things, because right now I hear people say if inflation gone up, so everything got up already. So now I just want to know if that's can we able to get more funding for particular this type of program, since it's already, we're going to get closer to July. We're not going to get it done by then, right? Are we going to lose our money, $1 million, or are we going to have?
No, this is obligated. So this is already in a column waiting for Stockton to help them spend it. As for finding more money and inflation, yeah, there is more money, and yeah, inflation's going to kill us when it comes to contracts. But this measure, the Air District got this money a long time ago, and they've been holding it until we tell them how to spend it. Is that fair to say, Aaron?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I don't see, I mean, this is what the CERP is. It's approved. At this point in time, I don't see us going back and change anything, because that's a way larger discussion. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to just basically get this thing off and running and get somebody selected to start this project.
Yeah, Doug, I'll say I talked with Jessica and Ryan about this briefly, and Samir about this briefly. And that, we all wrote this budget without a whole lot of time or information. And so everybody understands that there may need to be some flexibility on total amounts, but I think it'll be easier to add dollars to the vegetative barrier and urban greening process if we have an approved work plan and we're making progress on this idea. I think one of the, there's measures that we have that have lots of funding that may not be spent easily. But I think we got to prove that we know what to do with $1 million before we can ask for more.
So Doug, what in the chat, and you can take that if you want, there's a Word version of the work plan for Stockton in there. Plus there's links to the Fresno one that kind of gives you the approved one. It's basically the same thing. So there's two different ways to get it. Now you can take the Word version of it and put it in the Google Docs and share it that way if you'd like to.
Cool. Well, Mary Elizabeth, I liked your idea of having a review session where we could all talk about this and see if we have any issues, so that in February we're telling Aaron, this looks good enough for Stockton and let's move forward. And then we can move on to fine tuning those requests for proposals in March and April meetings. And maybe I think there's one thing in both of those measures that crosses over both of them, which is maintenance and stewardship of both of these measures. And I know how to call the people in West Oakland, but I think you guys would find that interesting. We don't have to let them come to a meeting, but I'm just going to recommend that because I think they have put some calories into solving this problem that we could save ourselves. So I think we need to go back to the agenda and talk about, first off, are we looking at the same, what is this, the third Wednesday or third Tuesday? It's the third Tuesday already, Stephanie? Yeah, it is the third Tuesday in the month.
It is.
So for for February, what's that looking like? That's gonna be the 15th,
Yes.
day after Valentine's Day. Does that work? That still works for everybody?
And we did for the actual meeting as requested in the last CSC meeting to do a recurrence. So this one is set for 3 months,
Oh,
and I think
yeah.
we'll just kind of reevaluate. I mean, it's open to the CSC, but as it stands right now is third Tuesday for the next 3 months. So if we want to change that, I'm happy to, but as it is, it's already set for that third Tuesday for next
Great.
month.
Great. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay, great.
No objection. I just want to say that I've asked Stephanie to actually, even though it's already preset and it should be in people's calendars, I don't know how to do the calendar thing. And I've asked Stephanie to send out reminder emails to the whole group, actually, like we said we would do. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I've been seeing Stephanie emails to the whole CSC for every subcommittee meeting, right?
Typically we had been, and then for a while we were sending a lot of emails, so I don't think it was always, the reminders were always going out, but I mean, we're happy to kind of do whatever is easiest for the subcommittee. We don't want to bombard people with emails, but if it's helpful, then we're happy to do it.
Maybe once a week?
Once a week email.
It's just that sometimes we might have drop-ins from the rest of the CSC that might want to come to a tree subcommittee too. So just seeing it as a reminder, I think is helpful.
Thanks
Yeah,
for that
and-
reminder, Margot. And the sign-in sheet is actually pretty important because that's where I pull additional, we have our CSC email list, and then I pull from the additional sign-in sheet. So if you're not on our regular mailing list, go ahead and sign in.
Perfect. And then we make an announcement at every month CSC meeting when the next tree subcommittee meeting. That'll be a part of our, update every month.
Yeah.
So we've got a date for the next tree subcommittee meeting. Before we all leave, do we want to talk about a potential collective review session of the work plan so that we can make a forceful evaluation and recommendation at the February 15th meeting? Does anybody want to take a look at later this month or in that first week of February?
Yeah, there's a holiday in there. I guess the 14th would be the earliest holiday.
Yeah,
So
it's President's Day.
yeah, or I'm okay. This time is pretty good for me. I would like, if I could, just to ask the city, we have like a bigger picture, there's the TCC, and then there's the AB 617, and then we have, the city of Stockton as a whole. And so I'm wondering, has this effort here motivated or prompted the city to, take a look and, go a little bit further on, like what it would cost to, be regularly, not like, we haven't been doing any kind of maintenance, and so then things kind of get out of hand, and then there's the crisis and, and then the big, cut downs. So I'm wondering, is there like, has somebody at the city, like really taken a look at how important this is for, our whole climate change action? Because heat islands is like, it's a critical health and happiness issue.
Talk to your city council members. The city, there's just no money for it at this time. But talk to your city council members. They're the ones that make up the budget.
Yeah, and I think Mary Elizabeth, the municipal idea is struggling around this all over the place. And so lots of community-based organizations are looking at California's money, of which it has too much, and are doing this in a partnership strategy. And so I really think, this TCC partnership is a small group of people doing a small discrete project, and it needs to have more people in a neighborhood by neighborhood coalition supporting a citywide, citizen maintenance and care project. I think the truth is, the city's never going to go back to having 400 public works people who do everything everywhere in the city. our city likes to build out into the swamps anyway. So if you keep growing the city, the same head count doesn't always add up, right? But I do think that this is like a crazy opportunity. I mean, I used to get a CAL FIRE grant every time I wrote it because the city of Richmond had a set aside from a Chevron settlement, and they would put $100,000 aside every other year as a match for that CAL FIRE proposal. And that was $500,000 every other year. And that's really something that we could do here if some of these dollars from the urban greening and vegetative barrier measure were put into a long-term maintenance trust, like they're talking about in West Oakland. I don't know that it's a good idea, but it's the best one I've heard.
And we are on very good terms with CAL FIRE, and they would fund us if we were able to put in an application. We
bet.
just haven't had the capacity to do that now for several, since we got permission to deal with trees at all anymore.
Yeah, well, the city didn't have the community partners, frankly. I mean, we're always talking about the city not doing its job. There weren't the orgs doing this on the scale. I know Peace and Justice has been planting for a long time. So what if since we're at the clock, what if we email everybody who signed in today and did a doodle poll for when we want to review the work plan in advance of the February 15th meeting? Will that work for everybody else? Great. And then this agenda, we're going to bump today down, January 18th, and start building a new agenda above it for February 15th. And I will take a first stab at synthesizing what we just sort of talked about. And we'll even put in that preliminary meeting between now and then in this agenda so that it's all captured in one body. Does anybody have any objections to that? And so anybody can log into this same Google Doc, or you can just email me and I can send it to you as a Word doc. That's a really easy thing for me to do.
And Matt, if you have an email address, so if you need other documents, they're all there, but if you need them, whatever you need, just email me, say, hey, we're missing this for our meetings, like that, just let me know.
Yeah, I feel like I've linked them all in here. You guys do a really good job of creating static links for most of your stuff. I checked all the links and they're all still working. So I think we got most of what it is. Oh, and I can add to this though, our TCC priority areas that we've updated.
And Matt, if I could just quickly share, we heard the request of something visual, something kind of sharing, what's happening next. So we can come up with like a timeline to share it with the committee next meeting. And then also we wanted to share that, as you all know, Fresno is kind of a step ahead. So they're currently working on their RFP. And so we'll have a draft of the Fresno RFP for you all to kind of take a look at to see what it looks like. But again, like Aaron's saying, really the next step is, of course, focusing on getting approval, submitting and getting approval for the project plan, work plan, whatever you want to call it.
Cool, thanks. I just tagged you in this doc, Stephanie, for the process map link. Awesome. Well, if that's all, for the good of the order. Be well.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Matt.